Hi everyone, welcome to the third section of Ecology. Today we're going to deal with 8 questions, all of very significant importance. They've all been asked as an exam question in the past, and they have the potential to be asked as an exam question next June. So without further ado, we'll begin with the first question. Question 1 deals with a food chain. So first of all, we're going to define what a food chain is. A food chain is a sequence of organisms in which one organism is eaten by the next one on the chain. So the grassland is our ecosystem that we're going to be doing this year. And an example is a dandelion gets eaten by the butterfly, which is then eaten by the thrush, and then eaten by the hawk. This is enough information for you to define and give an example of a food chain in the exam. Off you go, write it down, do it out twice in your notes. Question 2 refers to trophic levels. So what is a trophic level? It is a feeding stage in the food chain. So the producer, which we spoke about in our last video, is the buttercup. The second trophic level is the primary consumer, example the caterpillar. The third trophic level is the secondary consumer, example is the blackbird. And the fourth trophic level, which is not always there, is the top consumer, and the example in the grassland is the fox. Once again, everything here is enough information to get you full marks in the exam. Question 3 is a food web. So a food web consists of 2 or more interlinked food chains. You don't need to know a full example, you won't need to know a food web in this amount of detail, but if you took maybe 1 or 2 sections from this as an example to draw into your exam, it'll be really good. But the most important thing here is the definition. It's 2 or more interlinked food chains. Question 4 is a really commonly asked question on the Leaving Cert. It's about a pyramid of numbers. A pyramid of numbers shows the amount of each organism at each trophic level. So you can see here the first trophic level, the grass, there's a lot more grass than there are rabbits, and there's a lot more rabbits than there are foxes. And this is very typical of a food pyramid and a food chain. An important point, and it's been asked in the Leaving Cert, they are limited to 3 or 4 trophic levels. Why? Because there's so much energy lost at each stage. The energy transfer from trophic level to trophic level in a pyramid of numbers is huge. Our next question is a niche, another really commonly asked question in the short questions. It's the specific role that an organism plays within the community. The example we're going to give is the blackbird. The blackbird only feeds on worms and fruits, so it doesn't feed on the insects in the trees, and it doesn't feed on the insects in the air. There's other birds that feed on those insects, and they've got their own specific niche. So the niche of the blackbird is to feed on worms and fruit only. Our next question is a big long-winded question. It begins our introduction into the carbon cycle and the nitrogen cycle. It's about nutrient recycling. So it's fairly simple when you break it down. If you learn this word for word, you'll have a really good comprehensive answer for nutrient recycling. It is the way in which elements such as carbon and nitrogen are exchanged between living and non-living components of the environment. So it's the way in which things like carbon and nitrogen get from the air into the ground and back into the air again, usually passing through animals or plants along the way. Why is it important in nature? A really commonly asked question as well. Nutrient recycling is important because it returns the elements such as carbon and nitrogen to the environment so it can be reused again and again and again. It means that the planet doesn't have to come up with new forms of nitrogen and new forms of carbon, that it can be reused constantly and it's being recycled. Our 7th question introduces the carbon cycle. It's not as commonly asked as the nitrogen cycle, but quite often questions here and there are thrown in on it. So this is a general introduction into the carbon cycle, and if you can learn this section off by heart, you'll have more than enough information about it. The carbon cycle is the process by which carbon in the environment is converted into carbon in living things. So how does the carbon that's in the environment all around us get from the environment into living things? The carbon in living things is then later released back into the environment. So the carbon cycle is quite simply carbon going from the environment into living things such as plants or animals and back into the environment again. More specifically, on question 8 about the carbon cycle, give a role of plants, animals and microorganisms within the carbon cycle itself. A role of plants. They remove carbon from the atmosphere by photosynthesis. That is loads of information about plants in the carbon cycle. Animals. Animals obtain the carbon because they eat the plants and then they release it into the atmosphere again by respiration. The third role that can be played is by microorganisms. Fungi and bacteria return the carbon to the atmosphere by decomposing dead plants and animals in the ground. Those two slides, question 7 and question 8, is enough information for you to get full marks on any question asked in the carbon cycle. Put the head down now, get your 8 questions done, studied and written out. You'll be in a really comfortable position with nutrient recycling and the carbon cycle in ecology. Best of luck.